Welcome to episode 208 of the CUInsight Experience. I'm Randy Smith, joined as always by my brilliant and beautiful co-host, Jill Nowacki. This episode is brought to you by Alacrity, a leading payments fintech helping credit unions compete with challenger banks and digital wallets. Alacrity delivers seamless real-time money movement experiences for loan payments, A2A transfers, digital disbursements, and bill pay with a single cloud-native platform that connects to the clearinghouse, Fedwire, ACH, and FedNow. Credit unions can modernize without overhauling legacy infrastructure. You can learn more at their website, which we will link to in the show notes and all over the place. So today we're diving into a topic that is more than just a buzzword. It's the foundation of everything that we do in the credit union movement: trust.
That's right, Randall. Trust is the currency that keeps credit unions thriving, especially today, where digital transformation, cybersecurity threats, and evolving member expectations are reshaping the landscape. But trust isn't just built through technology. It's earned through transparency, inclusion, and community.
Exactly. And to kick things off, I wanted to share just a quick story here from a credit union leader we all know. Previous guest of the podcast, friend of both of ours, but I won't mention their name. But I recently spoke with them, and they talked about rallying around a member who was going through a tough financial patch of life. And the member told them afterwards, "You saw me." And to me, that's one of those things where you talk about building trust with a member. And I think we all have stories like that from our credit unions.
Absolutely. And it's that same trust that really fuels inclusion and that financial inclusion we talk about so much here in the credit union space, and empowers people, especially those who have been historically underserved, to take control of their situations. I've seen firsthand how building trust internally within teams and leadership really creates these ripple effects out into the community. So we can build that trust with our teams, and then our teams are empowered to go out, build that trust with the communities and create something better. And we're going to talk about that today too.
So, and we will explore what trust means in the credit union world, how it's being tested in this new era that we are all living through, and most importantly, how we as leaders can strengthen it. We'll share some real stories, offer actionable strategies, and even issue a little challenge for all of our listeners out there to build trust in their teams and credit unions as they go forward.
Ooh, and that issuing a little challenge is something new. Hopefully that'll create some new engagement for us on LinkedIn and wherever else we post the podcast and interact with our audience members. So I'm excited. Let's dig into it. Whether you're a seasoned CEO navigating digital shifts or you're a new leader focused on building culture, this conversation's for you. And let's do it. Because in our world, trust isn't just a value. It's our superpower.
Well, here we go. Episode 208, amazingly enough, of the CUInsight Experience. And it's going to be all about trust as the currency of credit unions. So I want to kick off we'll break this kind of down into a few segments here. But the first question is, why do you think, Jill, that trust is critical, or maybe even more critical than ever for credit unions as we're through the first quarter of 2025?
Yeah, I think that the world is spinning fast. And with that, trust is something that becomes this critical element. Things are moving so quickly. People are having to keep up with that. And being able to know when they can trust something, instead of having to scrutinize, scan, really look into something deeply, it's going to be a time saver for people. I've heard before, the definition of trust that I like the best is this idea that trust is both about the character and competency. And so we're in a world right now where we want to know both what the character of something is, but what the capability is too. And that's where trust comes in. So we might love our local financial institution, but we also have to know that they're capable of delivering to us in the way that we need to, or that our expectations are today. And so when we have both of those factors, we know what to expect. We know how to engage with that. And it just makes our life a little easier. And I haven't met anyone in the past, decade, maybe longer, who's like, what I'd like is my life to be a little more difficult. Just make things a little more hard for me. And so that idea of being able to know that you have trust there, it gives you a shortcut in a decision-making element. And I think that's really important. So that's why I think trust is more critical than ever for credit unions.
There are a couple things that you said there, and it made me think of something that I've talked about for many years now. And there's so many different ways we could go with this, but what the members' expectations are of us as credit unions and, in the community and so on. And we can look at that from a technology standpoint. Like, there are things today that just are table stakes, and they have to know that that's going to be a smooth process, whether that's digitally or in the branch or whatever it happens to be, but also that it's got to be safe. I remember a few years back when Chuck Fagan was on the podcast from Valera now. At the time, it was PSCU. And he said, you know what, Randy, in the last few years, there is one thing not in the budget that I've never said no to an increase on, and it's cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. And he's just like, because you have to be able to keep ahead of that. And I remember very early on in my career, there was an early manager of mine saying, you're dealing with people's money, and it's money in their family. The two things, it means a lot. And it doesn't matter if somebody has $10 or if somebody has $10 million. It's all of their money. They do need to trust you. But I do think, that idea of what the member expectation is and how that changes over time and how we not only keep up with it, but hopefully can stay ahead of it. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, not too long ago, I started giving some real thought into changing consumer expectations. I shouldn't even say changing consumer expectations. I'll say changing human expectations. Because I think when we think about this, we have to think about the members we serve, but we also have to think about the employees that we work with and engage with. And I ultimately decided to lay this out from this idea of like a pyramid that's almost like modeled off of Maslow's hierarchy, but it's this idea that what is the base expectation that a human has of you up to the tippy top? Like, what would they ultimately like to see in this period of like total actualization of it? And really in every element, what it comes down to is, can I trust you? So at the base level, can I trust you to keep me safe? And in this case, it's protecting data. For the employee, it's can I trust you to run an organization that I'm not going to find myself unemployed in? But even with some credit unions right now, I'm hearing this more and more. If credit unions are, for example, offering I-10 lending, individual taxpayer identification number lending, their members are coming to them and saying, can I trust you to keep my immigration status safe as well?
Yeah,
can I trust that I can come into your lobby and have that be a safe place? And so it's not just cybersecurity safety, it's physical safety, it's psychological safety in that side of it. And then ultimately this expectation we have of our credit unions, I won't go through every step of the pyramid, but up at the tippy top of that pyramid, it's can I actually trust you to make decisions that are in my best interest? And that's where credit unions really differentiate from other financial institutions. Because here's the thing, so when we talk about trust, we talk about what is it that I expect you to do? What is it that I expect you to behave? And we may know people whose values don't align with us, businesses whose values don't align with us. And we can say, well, I can trust you to do exactly this. So I can trust that a for-profit bank is going to run its financial institution in a way that is going to return the greatest value to its stockholders.
Yep.
I expect that from them. But if my credit union is telling me, hey, we're not all about profit, we're not all about stockholders, we're here to make the best interest for you. And then I, as a member, find out I'm getting charged something I shouldn't, or I was given a loan that I shouldn't be given even. My expectation, if you say you're here to serve me, is that you're not going to give me a product or a service that doesn't serve me well. And I think that's where credit unions really have this place to differentiate and earn that trust from members by really delivering that to say, hey, you know what? I can give you this loan, but it's really not in your best interest to take it. So what if we look at buying this car instead of this car? What if instead of you having 16 overdrafts that you pay this overdraft fee for, we consolidate some loans, give you a one-time signature loan and get you back on a repayment plan? I might lose money as the credit union based on fees, but the trust that should build with the member should be far greater. And so really when we think about human expectations from the credit union, they should expect the credit union to be making decisions that are in their best interest. And I don't think they should expect that from a for-profit bank necessarily.
You kind of said our differentiator, and then that trust could be our big one, and especially in such a competitive landscape. It's not only the big money center Wall Street banks, it's also the fintechs out there. I mean, I know a lot of our credit unions work with fintechs, but there are people in the money business nowadays. That wasn't primarily where they started, but they see an opportunity. And my guess is, sure, be providing a service, but again, a for-profit business, what the motivation is in the end, they wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't something they thought they could make a bunch of money at. Before we kind of move on from this segment, is there points you would like to make? And I will throw this out there to our listeners. Take a minute. Think of the last member interaction you had, or if you're in more of a leadership role, and think about that interaction with your team. Did it build trust? Did you break trust? What made the difference? And, I think we'll talk a little bit later about what we can do to build it back if we did break it a little bit. So, and any thoughts as we wrap up this first section?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about something that maybe is a little bit of a deviation from the path, but something that I think businesses right now are really challenged by. We know there is an increase in bad actors related to fraud, related to cybersecurity threats. And so to your point, talking about Chuck and Chuck saying, hey, I'll never turn down a budget request for cybersecurity. I know there are so many credit unions out there. There's so many businesses out there that are doing everything they can to invest in that, to strengthen that. And unfortunately, sometimes bad things still happen to good businesses in that case. And so that's kind of an interesting, I guess, nugget to ponder a little bit is what happens if the credit union's done everything right, everything according to regulation, compliance, and something bad still happens related to cybersecurity, related to fraud. And so I think the reason I raise that is because I want to acknowledge that sometimes things happen that might potentially create a level of distrust. Something happens we didn't expect, something that happens we didn't want. And in those cases, how we react to it is at least as important in rebuilding and regaining trust as it is, how we try to prevent it from happening. And I would extend that, it's easy to talk about that from a cybersecurity standpoint, because I think there are so many credit unions out there that can see that go wrong for somebody else and think, thank goodness that wasn't me, because it feels like it's just a matter of luck sometimes in these situations.
Or just matter of time before it is me, right?
So we watch how people respond to it and we think, did you own your role? Did you try to provide resources? Did you give support to that? But I think if you take this idea down to a micro level, that sometimes bad things happen to good people, it's easy to talk about from a cybersecurity standpoint, but sometimes as leaders, we have those flaws too. And we know what our leadership style is. We know what we believe, but we're under stress and we have a bad day and we lash out in a way that isn't aligned with like who we really want to be as a leader.
Right. Yep.
And how do we own that? Like when we reprimand an employee and then find out later, oops, that employee actually didn't do anything wrong. Or we reprimand the employee and the employee did do something wrong, but we reprimand them in a way that doesn't align with how we really speak constructively. Are we able to say, hey, that's on me, and rebuild that trust? Because what we know is that it takes years and years and many positive experiences to build trust, but it doesn't take very long at all to break that down. And so as we move into that kind of hey, what was your last member interaction or your last employee interaction?
Absolutely.
And did it build or break trust? And recognizing that, sometimes trust does get broken, but how do you immediately start to rebuild that or keep it from being a permanent break in that situation too?
I agree. Let's keep going down that and talk about not only as credit unions, but as leaders, things that we do. You mentioned reprimanding an employee. We've mentioned cybersecurity attacks, that type of things, but other ways that trust gets eroded in our credit unions, in our communities, and quite honestly, in our teams. Those external ones we can say, tech outages, security incidents, unresponsive service. We talk a lot about service, and whether that's digital or in person or whatever, and that can obviously do it. But what are some other ones that you can think of that really do, not only in that moment, erode trust, but maybe consistently over time. This is a leadership podcast, so maybe we focus more on that, right?
Yeah. Although I will first start talking about a product usage and member interactions, and it has to do with fair lending. So what we see sometimes happen, and where this can get really tricky, and this is like an area of what are you willing to dig deep on as a leader to really check things. And so financial institutions in the United States have a historic experience with redlining. And what that looks like is mortgages being given to certain people and not others. And so government stepped in and said, okay, Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, let's make sure, let's watch this, let's look at this. And we've seen situations over the past couple of years where there have been some flags on credit unions, even financial institutions, but credit unions too, that say, hey, it looks like you're engaging in some discriminatory lending practices. You're not giving mortgages to people who you should. And the credit union is able to say, we're not being discriminatory, we're following policy. And the policy comes from credit scores, or the policy comes from neighborhoods. And the reality is the policies that are in place do make sense, but the practice of those policies is creating something because we didn't dig deeper into how credit scoring works, for example, to identify that actually does create some challenges. So we have credit unions that are out saying, we are all about serving the underserved. We are all about helping the community. We are all about financial inclusion for all. And then you dig a little deeper and say, wow, the average credit score these credit unions are lending to you is 720 or 750 or something that is indicative of maybe not digging so deep. And then it comes back to regulatory policy. And so that's an area where trust can be easily broken because what's being put out, and I think what might be in the hearts of leaders is this idea to provide financial inclusion for all. But what's being done by policy is actually preventing the practice that is what they say they want. And so in those cases, there's a huge level of encouragement for credit unions to really look into, don't just follow the policy, but dig deep into the policy and really see if the policy allows you to deliver on that promise you're making to members. And if it doesn't, figure out how to fix it so that you are delivering on that commitment you're making to your community, to your members, to your underserved markets. If it's not easy to do at face value because you're like, oh, the regulator won't let me, then try harder, I guess, on that side. If this is who you say you are, you need to execute that across all levels. And it's not enough to say, oh, well, the policy prevents it. Like, it has to be a deep dig into that.
If you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk, right?
Yeah. And I think that's what absolutely erodes trust. Or that's a challenge we might face as an industry is if we go out and say, we're all about financial inclusion for all. We are all about helping the underserved. We are all about value delivered to members, people over profit. We better make sure that the numbers back that up in that side.
Absolutely. How about from a leadership standpoint? I mean, I can think back through my journey in some spots where I'm sure I eroded that trust by whether it was not following through or saying one thing and doing another or whatever it happened to be. On the show, we always talk about all the leaders from around the country that you work with. Is there something you see, maybe it's even in the coaching side of things, where you're like, maybe you have to ask the tough question to a leader of a credit union that's like, why would they trust you? You got to fix this. My guess is maybe you wouldn't be in that direction, but
no, I don't think I've ever said, why would anyone trust you? So one of my favorite, gosh, I won't even call it a quote. I'll call it maybe like a thoughtful reflection to invoke accountability is that we judge ourselves by our intentions and we judge others by their actions. Absolutely. And when you flip that around, what that means is others judge us by our actions, not by our intentions. And so one of the places where I see big mistakes happen is in leaders who say, hey, here in our organization, we are all about equity. We're going to make sure that we create opportunities where everybody gets a chance to advance, to build their career, to give it their greatest contribution. And then we have a chance to hire somebody to come in at a key leadership position. And maybe we appoint somebody directly to that role. or we hire somebody who we have experience with already. And we as leaders then might say, well, this is me giving an opportunity to someone who I know is going to be excellent. Like I know my intentions, which is to build this really great team. I know that even if we go through this whole process, this is the person who's going to come out on top of that search. And so this makes sense. But if I'm a team member watching that from the outside, the action I see is you were given an opportunity to bring somebody into the leadership of our organization, and you brought in your buddy. You didn't really take a fair look. And now again, I can go back and I can look at the intention of that leader. I'm building a great team. I'm bringing in somebody who knows how to do this. I'm not wasting people's time by going through some performative steps on this. But that's a place where the intentions and the actions don't always, they look different from someone's heart to what somebody's seeing from the outside with that. And that's an example of a place where a leader might know their intent, but a team member sees actions that don't align with that, and that erodes some trust. And it's a power differential where it's not like the team member can go and say, hey, what's up with that? Because it doesn't feel like we really did an equitable process here. And so they're left with this kind of the team member judging the action without really getting any clarity or really even giving the leader the chance to explain what the intent was behind something in that case. So
I can think of so many times in the hiring process where it's like, oh yeah, I know who I want, but then actually going through the process and doing the entire interview cycle, and all of a sudden you're like, boy, doesn't mean they were a bad pick, but boy, this other person shined when in that process. And it was like, ooh, good thing we didn't just pick the friend, I guess you could say.
What about you? When you think about, and it doesn't have to be a story of your own, but maybe something you've seen, that idea of, a time when you've seen trust be broken and maybe a really great, like, what are the strategies to rebuild that trust in that case?
The one thing that always pops into my head, and it may be from doing a couple hundred episodes of this podcast, interviewing leaders and things like that, but I'm not sure there was a single one who didn't say they have an open door policy. I'm not sure if any of them didn't say that failure is just a learning experience. And those tech terms like fail fast and fail cheap, but this idea that failure is accepted and almost encouraged, I guess that's one of those where it's like, how many of us walk that walk when somebody makes that big mistake, but they were trying something? Are we, well, at least they were trying. Now, would we learn from it? And not like, you're done. Or even if that's not the case, mentally, is it like that person screwed up? Do they take a notch down internally in the way that you view them? Within the organization. So
they dropped the ball in that stretch assignment, so I'm not giving them another stretch assignment.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So then
you didn't really mean fail fast, fail forward.
And that to me that's one of those things when I think of a real world where many of us may struggle, right? Like we want to have the open door policy unless it's closed. As long as as long as it's open and convenient for me, then the door is open.
Fine if you fail, as long as it's not on anything that actually matters.
Right. But I'm sure we've all tried to get time with somebody before, and you might try one or two or three times, and then you're like, okay, this obviously is not a priority. So I'm done. And you just move on to the next thing. So, I mean, those are the types of things that I go back to, like what I said when you were talking there was, if you're going to talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. Like, and make sure to take that self-reflection to look internally at ourselves and say, do I mean open door policy? Do I mean I'm good with failure? Do I want people to try? Do I want people to question me? What type of leader am I really? The other thing that I think of is I think trust, it can tie into even some of the other episodes we've done this year, like integrity and things like that as well, or authenticity. If you say you want to be something or you think you do, but you're not, if you're not that authentic, people aren't going to trust you about kind of believing what you say. We all read the books and we read the blogs to come into the next staff meeting. And suddenly it's like, this is how we are as a team. It's like, no, we're not. So I think that's one of those places that we come back from the last greatest conference and we have this amazing idea from a conversation or from a presenter or something like that. It's like, this is who we are now. No, we're not. But doesn't mean we can't work towards it. And then from a business standpoint, whether it's credit unions or vendors or anybody out there, is a firm believer, you hear me say it all the time, is to try to outperform people's expectations. Because when you don't, if you promise things or you say you're going to do something and you drop the ball on it and don't do it, it also doesn't take long for people to not trust your word. So, and I think you see that whether it's in teams or leadership or anything. So.
Yeah. I want to take it back to something you said a couple of minutes ago, which is that idea of that I have an open door policy, but really I have an open door policy when I don't have something else going on. And it's kind of this interesting thought where somebody thinks, well, it's the right thing to say we have an open door policy. So we say that we have an open door policy. And in reality, if your leader says, hey, I got a lot going on, but I'm going to be completely available to you during these office hours, or I'm completely available to you during our scheduled one-on-one, and I will not cancel that one-on-one. I will not be late for it. I will not, I'm not telling you, hey, stop by anytime and I'll be available. I'm saying I'm going to make this time for you. And you think about what's more likely to build trust, and it's that consistently doing what you say you will is going to build trust so much better than if you say, I have this aspiration of something that I'm going to do 50% of the time. Like the aspiration may be more giving. It may be better than what you can actually commit to. But if you can deliver on a smaller commitment 100% of the time, then kind of half-heartedly phoning it in on something big 50% of the time, you're going to build more trust by consistently delivering on what you say you can actually do, even if it's a smaller, it might not be as lofty, but you've done it consistently. And that's what's going to build trust.
There's something you and I constantly talk about, consistency. And that's a huge thing at CUInsight that I've always said is one of our superpowers is we consistently do everything. If we're going to do something, we do it consistently. I would also say this may make you laugh a little bit because you know it even just in our family. There's that honesty thing where sometimes if I'm asked to do something, I very rarely say maybe. It's normally yes or no, right? But but everyone knows it's like, no, there's no we'll see. It's like, no. So do you have time for a meeting? No.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I'll geek out for a little bit and bring some leadership principles into that particular story. But there's this idea of, so Patrick Lencioni talks about 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. And he also loves himself a good pyramid. And so starts at it. And with those 5 behaviors, the basis of anything that builds a cohesive team is trust. That's the bottom of the pyramid. And he talks about trust. He talks about this idea of vulnerability-based trust, but he also talks about this idea of we build trust by getting to know each other and having a pretty good idea of how you're going to respond in a situation. So you talk about this, I either say yes or I say no. I don't say maybe. So Crosby knows exactly what he can count on you for sure. And there are things that he will talk about it and he'll say, I won't ask Randy to do this because he won't say yes to that. But there are things that he feels more comfortable asking you about than me because he knows you're going to be like, yeah, that sounds fun. Let's do it. Where I might be a little more wishy-washy or maybe just a hard no on something from that side of it. Bringing in our home life is really interesting. What it illustrates, though, is, Crosby knows if you say no, you mean no. If I say no, or if Crosby's dad says no, he'll try to ask us 5 or 6 more times.
And if I say yes, I'm all in. So.
Right. Yeah. And frankly, sometimes he doesn't get that with both of his parents, where sometimes a yes means maybe later in our cases. And with you, a yes usually means sure this afternoon. So
let's do it. So, all right. Well, I am looking at the stopwatch app here on Zoom, which I'm so excited about. After 208 episodes, I just found this last time. So it's amazing. Yes, I own a digital publication. Crazy. Anyways, let's get to just kind of some practical steps that credit union leaders can take to wrap it up. We've talked about a lot of them to sustain trust today in today's environment, but also long term. And then just that kind of call to action that we tease that we'd love to see everybody out there doing after they listen to this.
Yeah. So the practical steps, it's not even a practical step. It's a behavior that I think is the critically important behavior is transparency. Be open, be accurate, be forthcoming. And whatever it is it about fees? Is it about decisions? Is it about where you stand on DEI? Like whatever it is, like say what it is you're going to do, deliver on that, and be honest about it. And I think that's that idea of if we say we are all about this thing, own that fully. I've worked with plenty of credit unions who have said, you know what, we are not going to be able to deliver the best possible digital experience that a member could get anywhere. But what we'll do better than anyone else is show up for our single member in a time of need. So if a member comes with us for a need, they can expect us to be fully there. But, fully transparent, we are not going to have the best banking app ever made, probably. And it doesn't mean all credit unions won't, but it is that be transparent about what you are committed to and then deliver that consistently over and over and over again.
The transparency is huge. And I think it's communication also, right? And that's part of what you were saying. And just this idea, whether it's to the members, to our staff, to our colleagues, to everybody, is making sure that communication is there, whether it's good, bad, and taking accountability. I think that's huge. That was one thing that I think kept bouncing around my head was if a leader is passing the buck or blaming others always for their missteps or the organization's missteps, you are the leader. It does all fall on you in the end. That's why you get that office. The other thing I would say is really when you look at it from an organization standpoint, as leadership, you really do instill the values of the organization. And if your teams trust you, and if your teams trust the organization, if they trust the credit union, that from the inside out means it's more likely that the members are going to trust as well. So I think when we're talking about steps that leaders can take to build trust, whether it's today or in the future, that long-term vision, it's communicate a lot, follow through, overperform if you can. But I think nothing erodes trust more than saying you're going to do something or you have the capacity to do something and not doing that. And I think that comes back to the first things that you were saying. If you're saying you're serving the underserved, you better serve them. So that's where I would wrap that up.
So with that, then, I think this is a kind of the final key takeaway. So we've had the conversation today, and that last thing, I guess the key takeaway from our conversation that I would say I would leave it with is that be transparent, be consistent, and be accountable. Done.
Absolutely. I would like to challenge everybody out there. Let's do something fun with this. Take one of these trust building actions at your credit union or on inside the credit union or with your teams over the next 30 days. We would love to hear about it, honestly. So find us on LinkedIn. I would say go on X, but I'm never on that anymore. So never mind. Don't do that. But you can always shoot us an email, but I think LinkedIn's probably the best. Just that idea of what did you do or see or what type of action did you take to build trust in your credit union over your team? I mean, just some ideas take a look at your digital trust practice. Are you protecting data? I mean, that's such a big thing. A member town hall. And do you actually do something with the feedback or an inside the organization? Do you have a listening session? What are these things that you can do to build trust? We'd love to hear about it. And tag CUInsight, tag us, send it to us. We would love to hear more. So with that, Jill, I'll let you wrap it up before we do this recap.
Absolutely. So just a last kind of reminder, we come up with these topics for these podcasts and we're talking about let's talk about authenticity. And today we're talking about trust. And I think what's really key to think about in this case, when we came up with trust, we really talked about it as trust as a currency, a differentiator for credit unions. It's not a soft skill. It's a true strategic advantage in who we are as credit unions and what we deliver as a movement. So that would be kind of my last sort of reminder is this isn't a nice to have if we get around to it. Trust is our key strategic advantage in credit unions.
I couldn't agree with that more. So that is a wrap, a fun conversation as always. But before we go, we have just a Few quick housekeeping notes. As always, we'll link to everything we mentioned today in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. Mentioned LinkedIn. Jill's on there quite a bit. I've been actually trying to get on more just to see what's going on, what's being said. So we'd love to hear from you there. Drop us a message, share your thoughts, ask questions. We'd love to hear topics that you think would be a fun conversation or even guests for future episodes. We have another fun one coming up here soon. So let's keep this conversation going. A big thank you to our sponsor, Alacrity. They're leading payments fintech, helping credit unions compete with challenger banks and digital wallets. So that they're there to help us too and build that trust on the digital side. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the CUInsight Experience on your favorite podcast player. We're on them all. Everywhere you listen, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, whatever it happens to be. Looking for your next read, just a quick Google of the CUInsight Experience podcast book list, and you can get your next read one click away. And of course, a huge thank you to all of you for tuning in. Y'all rock. We appreciate every single one of you. Be well, friends. Talk to you next time.